at the bedrock of Relevance's investment thesis is the fact that we believe the only way to fix the healthcare business, which we call sick care today in the US and probably in most places in the globe, is to actually keep the patient out of the system, right? You have a for-profit system, and by definition, there is no incentive to really keep the patient out of the system.
Hey everyone, this is Prashant and I'll be your host of the VC Next podcast. And today we have Cameron Newton with us. Cameron is a founding member and managing partner at Relevance Ventures, a venture firm based in Nashville, Tennessee, investing in the wellness sector. In this episode, we talk about the story of why Relevance Ventures was started, the mental health crisis in the United States, how big is the opportunity in the wellness sector, how does Relevance help its portfolio companies succeed, their portfolio construction strategy, Cameron's biggest learning investing in startups over the years, and so much more. So without wasting any time, let's dive straight in. Hey Cameron, so good to have you on the VC 10X podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Prashant. Just happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having you on. To start things off, can we please have your story and why you started Relevance Ventures in the first place several years back?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. You really have to go back quite a ways to kind of get the full story. I graduated Stanford in '99, and a lot of people don't know this, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I went to acting school in Los Angeles for a little over a year, and then decided that wasn't for me. I had done a couple plays at Stanford. Always had this creative side to what I did. I had an economics degree, but yet had this kind of a calling to do something creative. Back in the early 2000s, went to work at B of A on Wall Street. Started in distressed debt. Stayed there for several years. Eventually, was hired by Wachovia in Charlotte, North Carolina, to kind of do the same thing. I ran their high yield fixed income research group. So I built about a 9-year career, kind of heavy analytics, research focused kind of career on Wall Street. And then, of course, in 08, 09, when the financial crisis hit, everything kind of changed. And I was at a point in my career where, that more or less had wiped me out. When I was at Wachovia, we had an $18 stock on Friday. Then Washington Mutual went into receivership, over the weekend, and the mortgage portfolio got marked down. So when we came into work on Monday, we were insolvent. So we had an 80-cent stock, and so more or less every ounce nickel of my net worth went up in smoke. And I had a lot of self-reflection to do. So I left the banking industry. I ended up taking a position at a large insurer running their derivatives trading platform. And while that sounds really sexy, and the people were wonderful there, it really was the least intellectually stimulating um, career move that I'd ever really undertaken. So during that period of time, I started deciding what I was going to do next in my career. And as I evaluated things, I realized still had this kind of itch to scratch on the creative side. So I love to create, I love to build. And then I had this decade-long career on Wall Street. And so when I meshed the two together, it really ended up landing me in this early stage venture kind of spot, and that I was really attracted to. And so early on, Relevance Ventures, as it is today, was actually formed in 2018. But there were predecessor firms, and of which I was a minority partner in, that started back in the early 2010s, actually around 2010, 2011. Back then, the focus of the predecessor firms was really more around seed investing, no focus, more generalist. And then as we kind of progressed up until 2018, my predecessor partners decided to exit the firm. I decided to become a majority partner along with my brother. My brother joined. And then in 2018, we rebranded the company as Relevance Ventures. We moved the corporate office to Nashville, Tennessee. We hired a brand new team of experienced professionals, and we set out to raise our first fund as a true Native American-owned venture organization. We completed that in December of last year. It was a $50 million fund. So you'll hear me talk about Fund One. When I reference Fund One, that's what it is our first fund as a Native-owned organization controlled by my brother and I. And we set out to set a strategy which really reflected when was pulled from things we're passionate about. So in 2016, our father, passed away from congenital heart failure, and he'd lived a really rough life. Really, as far as health, he smoked several packs a day, didn't really eat all that healthy, and that affected my brother and I. We watched him pass away in a state that was not necessarily something that people want to see. And so when we joined forces in 2018, it was driven by the fact that we had always wanted to work together as a brother and as a partnership. There's something that we had talked about since we were little kids, and that we now had this passionate kind of view around health and wellness and making sure that people understood that taking care of your body and eating right and doing things physical activity really leads to longevity, which leads to more time with your loved ones. And so we focused our fund around that concept, right? Health and wellness preventative care. And we closed that fund back in December of last year. It was 50 million in size. And I think we have 6 or 7 million of co-investment SPVs as well. So the total size is probably between 56 and 57. And now we're focused on new projects where, we're launching an investor network focused around health and wellness. We're also launching a nonprofit around Native American access to capital and alternatives, which will be announced fairly soon as well. And yes, and so it's been truly a great journey, and one that was not for the faint of heart. But we're in a very good spot now, and looking forward to our next fund.
Absolutely. Yeah, love that focus there on health and wellness. And I think that needs more focus. I think we are kind of in the middle of a mental health crisis, especially as has been the turn of events since COVID, one big event after another. Even now, we are in the middle of multiple wars going on around the world. So I think that's a very important sector to invest in, but also a very important personal topic for me as well. That's the personal aspect of it. That's the problem aspect of it, right? Let's talk about the opportunity aspect of it. How big of an opportunity is that sector, the wellness sector, and what are the kind of solutions that you're seeing come up in this area?
Sure. So the global wellness sector is about 5.6 trillion as defined by the Global Wellness Institute. We would actually add pets into that category, which probably makes it slightly bigger than 5.6 trillion. Since 2020, that category has been growing at about a 12% CAGR, and is forecasted to grow at about a 9% CAGR for the next several years to reaching, close to 8.5 by 2027. Some of the bigger categories that are in the wellness universe, which is very broad, right? Wellness really kind of is pervasive in many industries, but personal care and beauty is a big component. Physical activity and fitness is a big component. Healthy eating and nutrition. And then you get into traditional medicine versus non-traditional medicine. There's also spas and things of that nature. We would include pets into that category as well. And really, the concept that we invest behind in wellness is bringing balance to people, their lives, and communities, right? We used to use a term called harmony, and we try to explain to people that, hey, we wanted to create harmony within communities, within people's lives. And it became, that was a hard thing to describe in the context of financial returns, right? But I think most people understand the concept of balance. So if something is out of balance, bringing it back in balance is typically something that people really understand. And so we, as an investment thesis, we focus on companies typically between a million ARR and 10 million ARR. So that Series A, Series B space. We will do some seed investments in wellness, but typically that's backing entrepreneurs we've backed in the past, or we'll do some late stage stuff, but typically that's in portfolio. So we're doing a bridge financing into an exit or into an IPO or into another round, that sort of thing. But it's a super compelling space, right? And it's one that's growing, and one that I think will continue to kind of manifest itself as a category that you're going to see new entrants come into, right, in terms of venture funding. And but yeah, it's a huge category.
Absolutely, totally agree. And can you give us an example of maybe a recent company that you're back that falls right into the thesis that you just told us about?
Sure. I mean, you mentioned mental health as being a big crisis in the world, and in the certainly in the U.S. and other places. We
Yeah.
have two telepsychiatry companies within our portfolio. One is focused on outpatient telepsychiatry, which is where most people with anxiety, depression would go see a psychiatrist and get counseling. And then there's one that serves kind of hospital systems and helps them deal with their ER rooms and more acute telepsychiatry. But on the outpatient side, that company's name is Talkiatry, and it's based out of New York. So we've seed funded. We were one of the first institutional checks into the company. And early on, there were a lot of folks that said, "Hey, outpatient telepsychiatry is a loser. You can't make money doing that. There's not really too many offices around the globe that are actually doing well." And oh, by the way, it's 50% cash pay. You can't use insurance and all of the things. And so when we looked at it, we actually took all of that information and took a completely different view, which is we have a generation of young people coming up in the world that don't view mental health as a taboo, right? They don't view it as something that you shouldn't talk about, which is wonderful. So, one, we have a changing demographic. And then the fact that that demographic wants to use their insurance, right? They want to use insurance to pay for mental health and psychiatry, as opposed to perhaps their grandparents who didn't want anybody to know. They wanted to pay cash and it'd be hush hush. And so we saw these dynamics starting to work. And then we realized that if you could build a uniform platform, right, a technology platform where you reduce the overhead of delivering actual care, then you could have a real winner. So what's interesting about it is, when we invested in the company, it had nine clinicians, so doctors and nurses, and now we have 357. That's all within like a 2.5 year period. But perhaps most important, we ran a study on outcomes, right? So we took our patient outcomes. So we ran an 1,800 patient study with patients with anxiety and depression. Almost 80% of the patients experienced a reduction in symptoms. Okay. Almost 65% combined no longer had any clinically significant symptoms. And between 25 and 30% were in full remission of their anxiety and depression, all over a telehealth telepsychiatry platform, right? Those kind of numbers are staggering, right? So those are the kind of things that change people's lives. People with depression, and if you try to find a psychiatrist in a major city right now, you're going to be on a wait list for 6 months, 9 months, 18 months in some cases. Here we can give you access to that psychiatrist almost overnight, right? And so we're delivering care in a timely fashion. We're getting remarkable outcomes. And one can only imagine, like, depression can be a spiraling thing, right? I mean, it can be something that people end up hurting themselves or hurting other people. So I think getting those kind of outcomes on the platform is just remarkable. And so it's been one of the investments that we point to and say, hey, this is exactly the kind of thing that we invest in our wellness thesis that is having a real impact on people's lives and communities.
Absolutely, totally agree. And uh, one of the one of the centerpieces whenever we talk about health and wellness sector is actually insurance, right? Because that financial aspect, if we look into it, of course, all these things are important. People are struggling with mental health, they need therapy, but a lot of them do not have access to that because maybe their insurance doesn't cover that, or it's too expensive and stuff like that. And similarly for other kind of solutions that you subtly mentioned, like healthy eating, right? That prevents you from getting into the hospital, right? But your hospital only covers for you getting into the hospital, right? You falling sick, and then it can cover. But the solutions that are solving for that thing not happening, that is you not getting into the hospital, right, keeping you healthy, those kinds of startups, how does that impact the business market for that, because of the people's willingness to pay for it, because of the shadiness of if the insurer is going to cover it or not, right? And is there any push from maybe providers that insurance should cover these things as well?
Yes, I think the world's waking up to preventative care, right? So our at the bedrock of Relevance's investment thesis is the fact that we believe the only way to fix the healthcare business, which we call sick care today in the US and probably in most places in the globe, is to actually keep the patient out of the system, right? You have a for profit system, and by definition, there is no incentive to really keep the patient out of the system. So, but I think insurers and payers are wising up to this. So you're starting to see programs for food as medicine starting to take off in California, where there are payers that are actually paying for meals to be delivered to folks who are in high risk populations. Historically, food has been about food security, right? Just getting food to people who are hungry. That is shifting. It's a slow shift, but we're seeing it start to shift to where now not only is it about getting food to people who can't afford it or don't have it, but now it's getting healthy food to high risk populations so that we can keep them out of the hospital system, right? Or healthcare system. I mean, 80% of our healthcare spend in this country is on chronic diseases that can be prevented by food and lifestyle, right? So why wouldn't payers and why wouldn't people focus on that area of the market? And so that's what's starting to happen. You know, Everything in healthcare moves at a snail's pace, right? I mean, so you're seeing a lot of this manifest itself in the consumer market first through personalized nutrition, algorithms, microbiome tests that people are buying as consumers and ingesting and basically self-preventing disease and other things. But eventually, that sort of stuff is going to migrate its way into our healthcare system through wearables, through your remote diagnostics, things that are occurring now that once there are outcomes, like I mentioned, the Talkiatry outcome, if you're a payer and you see those kind of outcomes in a study, you would be crazy not to have your population covered for that service. So I think that's going to happen, right? It's just going to be slow, but we are on the kind of cusp of that movement.
Absolutely, that's very interesting. And talking about how you evaluate startups that are coming to you and pitching you. So one aspect is obviously you're checking that is that an impactful solution that can bring a relevant change, right? And the other aspect has to be the team, right? So what are the aspects that you're looking for in the team? Do they need to have prior background, stuff like that, or something else? So how do you evaluate the founding team and assess them if they have the ability to scale this to be something big, a big solution?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one we talk about internally a lot. So, look, we're a venture firm. So we look at the same kind of financial metrics that any venture firm would look at: total addressable market, go to market, those sorts of things, and theses. But at the end of the day, you hit on something that's really important. How do you evaluate the founding team? And we spend a lot of time on this because most of the mistakes we've made in the past, not all, but most, have been in and around bad decisions around founders and who we've backed. Now we haven't had a lot of that, but what we have had, is all you could always point back to red flags. And so we want to spend a lot of time with the founding group before we make an investment, right? We want to make sure we understand them. We see them in social settings. We see them with their team. Even in the initial pitch, we're reading how they're communicating and how they're delivering their pitch. Is the CEO letting the rest of the team speak? Or are they talking over one another? Or is there bad body language? All those sorts of things, right? And then, do you have a CEO or do you have a founder that consistently talks about networking and dropping names and people that they know? Typically, that's a way to mask an insecurity about something else, whether it be their operating chops or something else. So, those are all red flags. You don't ever get it perfect, but like we try and spend a lot of time on making sure that we can spend 6 or 7 years with this individual or team and it be a great working relationship. If you look across our portfolio, about 60% of our portfolio is either female founders or not underrepresented BIPOC founders. And that's not by design. Like we didn't do that. We didn't set out and say, hey, here's a quota. We're going to have 60% of our portfolio be BIPOC and female founded companies. So we spent some time thinking about why that is. Well, why that is typically those founders are more malleable, right? They come in less rigid, right? And they want to learn and they want to be sponges and they want to absorb things. When you get into white male founders, a lot of times you deal with ego. I'm not going to make some generalizations here, but I mean, I think I'm entitled to say. So you deal with
Yeah.
ego and sometimes and high levels of testosterone, right? So small arguments turn into big arguments, turn into fiascos, turn into things that take companies down, and so we gravitate towards people who actually are more balanced in their approach, and that's from their operating chops and from the ability to interact with us and to grow as a team and an individual. So there's no like perfect recipe for it, but we spend a ton of time on
Yeah. That's interesting. And on the point where you mentioned you want to see them in social settings and how they interact with people, I saw a tweet recently from someone. I'll not name them, but what that tweet said is basically that if a founder, if you take a founder to a restaurant and they are taking too long to order, then probably they're not a good investment because they cannot take quick decisions. And I said, I'm not sure that's true. What do you think of that?
I think that's probably too much of a. I mean, it depends, right? You know, quick decisions aren't always the best decisions, right? But like paralysis by analysis is a problem, right? So people get in, and in startups, it is typically driven by lack of focus, right? So you're focused on your go to market, you have a strategy, and then you have a great call with a group that's going to do this, that, and the other for you. And now the founder wants to go pursue that at the expense of your original mission. And then they can't make, then the decision tree can't be made and they get off target and then you get paralyzed. And so part of what we do as a firm is help those founders stay laser focused on what's at hand and what the mission is and like what the operating plan is and where the North Star is. And if we're going to change the North Star, that's fine. We're going to do it through a thoughtful process, and then we're going to run hard there and stay focused. And so typically we find that indecision comes from a lack of focus. And so from early on, we try to ascertain, say, okay, is this founder going to be excited about the every last phone call they have versus, hey, I can't take that phone call. I've got to stay on this. I've got 14 other things to do today to make sure that we reach our targets for next month. And so, and that's what we do through coaching, right? We try to help them through that. I mean, obviously, first time founders have a bigger issue with that than second time founders and third time founders. I mean, a lot of times, second time, third time founders are so laser focused that it's almost crazy, right? They would rather just give me all the money up front, so I never have to raise another dollar, and I'm going to run as hard as I can towards the North Star and hopefully get there. So, but I do think that there is that element of indecision that you see from time to time, but I would link it back to lack of focus.
Understood. Uh, yeah. So now let's talk about value add. So how are you supporting your portfolio companies and helping them succeed?
Yeah, so that is a big component of what we do. So we sit on the board of virtually every investment that we make, and we're very active board members. We don't run companies for people, but we're very active in terms of mapping out strategy, helping founders stay focused on, the prize. We help from an HR perspective, obviously, right? A lot of firms do that. Hey, you're looking for a CFO. We can use our network to try to find one in network. Um, so there are a lot of elements that we do to help founders, but I also think that there is this component of just being a friend, right? Building companies is extraordinarily difficult. And we have been fortunate to be named to Inc. 5000 or the Inc. magazine's top, friendly founder friendly firms for the second year in a row. My thesis on why that is because we have built our firm, right? So we built our firm from the ground up. We relate to the entrepreneur. We understand what they're going through from a family perspective, right? When they're working these late hours and driving, what they're getting at home, and the time lost with kids and wives and those sorts of things. So we relate, right? And so we help founders navigate that, which is probably an underrated component of what firms should do. And then I think we help companies get networked into other opportunities within our portfolio, right? Since we are health and wellness focused, it's a relatively tight knit community. So we may have a company with a platform that is, a marketplace for wellness products, and then we may have three wellness companies that have products, and so we'll help get them get distribution and synergies between our portfolio companies. And so, and the other thing that I think that is unique for us, that as opposed to many firms that I see, is we stay around until the very end, right? So we are early stage investors. We're typically in the A round or B, but we have companies we've been involved with for over a decade, that we're still involved with, even post merger and pre IPO, that we are a sounding board for the CEO. Like I still get calls, and I think that's a testament, right, to kind of our core belief in what we do. But that is definitely a differentiator.
Yeah, that's amazing. And let's also try and talk about portfolio construction, because you've been in the space for quite some time now, and I think running it from the forefront from 2018 onwards, right? So what's the approach that you're taking for portfolio construction? What is maybe the ownership percentages that you're targeting, and what are the key components that your portfolio should have in risk management? So tell us about that.
Yeah, so you can start with just diversity, right? From a general risk perspective, you should have a diverse portfolio. And when I'm so, when if you're in health and wellness, you don't want 50% of your portfolio in telepsychiatry. If you've got all these other components that make up the industry, and you certainly don't want an overweight in any one particular name. So for us, like 10%, getting any name over 10% of the portfolio would be kind of red line territory for us. And then I think, as you think about portfolio construction, there are several components that go into it, right? It's not just about the return at the end of the portfolio life, right? It's also about getting cash back to LPs. And so we evaluate companies based on stage. We try to layer in a fair amount of companies that we'll think will exit in 3 to 5 years. We'll have some that we think are going to be a longer gestation period. And we try to amalgamate all of those together so that we can start turning cash when we told LPs we would start turning cash. In venture in general, the power law of venture says, hey, you're going to have one or two names that are going to drive majority of return in your portfolio. We try to identify those early and continue to invest in those and support those and back those through multiple rounds of financing. But what's unique about our current portfolio is we have a very broad, diverse group of return drivers, which is unique, which is certainly positive for us. And so we try to keep failure rates low, right? And I think part of the reason why we focus on that 1 to 10 million ARR part of the market is uh, the companies that have reached that kind of segment typically have alleviated a lot of the early stage risks with go to market, product market fit, et cetera. Not always, but a lot of it, at least you're sniffing around the right area. And so we eliminate a lot of that kind of early stage risk by focusing on that part of the market. And then again, diversity in the portfolio, making sure that the positions are right size and that we're focused on getting cash back to LPs when we promised them we would.
Absolutely. That sounds like an amazing approach. And now let's talk about what's been your biggest learning personally investing in startups over the years.
Yeah, well, I've got a long list of those, but I'll start with just it is about the people, it is about the founders, right? You heard me mention earlier that the mistakes we've made have typically been in and around misevaluation of the founding team or the founders. And so that can manifest itself in just turmoil, right? Even when companies are doing great from a financial performance perspective, you can have turmoil within the team that is just like a cancer, right? And if you don't cut it out, it will kill you eventually. So, and it gets incredibly more difficult to deal with those issues on the back end or in the middle end than it is to deal with them on the front end. And so, one of my biggest lessons is, hey, make sure you spend enough time evaluating. It can be the best idea, the biggest market, greatest product or service. But if we don't have a founding team that we can back and most importantly work with in a marriage for 5 to 7 years, then we're going to have a lot of headaches, right? And as being a small team of 4 senior people and a handful of analysts and specialists, we can't be bogged down dealing with personal issues with founders when we need to be adding value across the portfolio on the growth side and on strategy side and other things that are important to providing value to our limited partners.
Yeah, I totally agree that the founding team is so important, and them being together and working together, and also their relationship with the VC, that is you, is also so important. Awesome. So now I'll just ask you one last question, which is off topic from venture. And this one is about, I've learned that you are a CrossFit trainer, if you can
Mhm.
confirm that. And I would love to learn more about that and what's your perspective on fitness and the importance of fitness, and not just in yourself, but also founders who are living high stress lives, basically. So, how much fitness is important in their life and in your life as well?
Yeah, I fitness has been a big part of my life. So I played baseball at Stanford. I didn't play very well, but I played. And it was always a big component of who I was as a kid, right? Sports and fitness and those things. And so as I got older, I lost a lot of that when I went into banking and and my health and stress and those sorts of things. I needed an outlet, and so I got into CrossFit. I ended up owning a CrossFit gym, got my level one designation, then got my level two designation. I've held on to those and continued to coach at our local CrossFit gym from time to time. I also own another fitness gym that's just a regular fitness gym. But for me, physical activity is something that is so super important to people, right? That they need it. There's a social component to it, but there's also like just the feel you get from a good workout or, being active. My wife, who's a yoga instructor and also a CrossFit trainer, will tell you that it is a key component to her life. I mean, we have three children. She is stressed out all the time. And if she doesn't get to work out or have physical activity, you know, uh, for her, it just leads to a lot of mental stress. And it's a relief for her to go into the gym and be able to move and be social and talk to people away from being a mom to three children all day. And so, and that can be the same for folks who have no children who work 14 hours a day or, have super high stressful lives. So for me, it is a super big component, and I think it's something that everyone should do. You don't have to do CrossFit, right? I mean, you can go for a walk after dinner. I mean, but just getting active, getting moving, and staying and understanding that a sedentary lifestyle, right, can lead to a lot of problems, and you can compound that with unhealthy eating and over and being overweight and those sorts of things, and then you can have an early termination of your life, and by the way, the quality of your life. I mean, people don't focus on that enough, right? I mean, it's like they focus on the terminal part, which is, hey, if you don't get your life together and quit eating bad and not exercising, you're going to die early. Well, what about the all the years before you die, where you're constantly in the hospital? You have diabetes, or you have gout, or you have these other issues that are probably driven by your environment and what you're doing and your lack of physical activity. So I've put a priority on it in my life, right? I think it's super important. I think I told you earlier about our father passing away and having a fairly unhealthy lifestyle. I think that affected both my brother and I. And so yeah, it's something that I value at a very high level.
Absolutely, and that's very on brand for Relevance Ventures as well, because that's what you're investing in. You want a healthy future for others, and I love that you're also following that yourself in your own life as well, by being fit and active yourself. Awesome. So now let's move on to the rapid fire round, wherein I'll ask you five quick questions about the investing that you're doing, and you have to give five quick answers. Sounds good?
That sounds great.
Awesome. So the first one goes: what are the sectors and regions you invest in?
Yeah, well, the sectors are health and wellness primarily. The regions are, 50% of our portfolio is in the southeastern United States, with 50% on either West Coast or Northeast, right? So we invest everywhere, but a heavy concentration, kind of what I would say from Texas to Florida up to Virginia.
Awesome. So what's the typical stage of investment?
Yeah, early stage. So, we say Series A and B, right? That definition of Series A and B has changed over time. So, if you want to put brackets around a revenue number, it's typically 1 million of ARR to 10 million of ARR.
Awesome. And what's the typical check size you put in?
So, we do some seed investing. So, we'll do 250K to 3 million kind of first check, and then we'll reserve a like amount in the fund for follow on.
Great. And where can founders apply for funding in case there's a direct way?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, relevanceventures.com, there's actually a contact button there. You can send into that email address, or you can contact me directly or our analyst, Jason Judge. And we're pretty open, so you can get to us many ways.
Awesome. And last one, where can our listeners follow you?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, probably the most. I mean, on Twitter, I'm at Cameron Newton 11, and then if you want to follow the firm, it's at Relevance VC. And so we're pretty active on LinkedIn and X, I guess it is today, not Twitter.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to put all those links in the show notes below so that our listeners can get there easily. Thanks so much for coming on, Cameron. It's been great having you on and love the mission that you're driving towards at Relevance Ventures.
Yeah, thank you, Prashant. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.